Iminatranta Legislature Guahan is back from recess. We will begin this morning, resuming with the second reading. When we left off yesterday, we were on Bill number 186-37 LS, sponsored by Senator Perez. Senator Blas had concluded his remarks. So is there anyone else who would like to speak on the bill, on the motion to put the bill in third reading? Any other senator who would like to be recognized? If not, then sponsor may close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues. Before I do closing, I would like to proffer an amendment. I believe it's in the Google Drive. It reads on line 9 to 26, page 3, and it amends section 2 of the bill. It states section 6505, use of collected fees and penalties for youth programs. All fines and fees assessed and collected under this chapter shall be distributed and deposited within 15 days of the following month in which fines and fees were collected, in the following manner by the Director of Department of Revenue and Taxation, 20% to the Better Public Service Fund for the Department of Revenue and Taxation to assist with compliance and enforcement of tobacco nicotine laws, rules, and regulations pursuant to this chapter, 30% to the Health and Human Services Fund for the Department of Public Health and Social Services, Division of Public Health, Bureau of Non-Communicable Diseases for the purposes of providing tobacco, nicotine, electronic cigarette prevention education programs, comprehensive cancer, breast cancer, and cervical cancer care, 50% to the Youth Tobacco Education and Prevention Fund, and to allow legal to make technical corrections. So this basically cleans up this section and addresses some of the questions that were brought up earlier by my colleagues, and I ask for my colleagues' support. Tzuzus Masi.
Tzuzus Masi. Senator Perez. On the amendment, is there anyone who would like to speak on the amendment? If not, Senator Perez, you may close on the amendment. She's waiving closing on the amendment. On this Perez amendment, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, amendment passes. Senator Perez, you may continue closing on the bill.
All right, thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill 186-37 is one measure in a series of measures that aims to address the epidemic of nicotine use amongst our youth by updating the distribution of fees and fines to expand compliance and enforcement efforts, in addition to funding prevention, cessation, and treatment. The statistics of nicotine use amongst our youth are alarming. Within a 2-year span from 2017 to 2019, the rates of electronic nicotine delivery system use amongst our youth increased from 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 in both our middle and high school students. In her testimony, Lily Vinch, Speaker of the 34th Guam Youth Congress, who stated that this bill is a step in the right direction to protect our youth, shared the story from her mother, a 4th grade teacher at Marshall Sablon Elementary School, which has weekly occurrences of her students being sent down to their counselors, their principals' offices, for being caught using these nicotine delivery devices in bathrooms or during recess. These students aren't even able to comprehend a chapter in their books, are using these nicotine delivery devices. Because of these high nicotine levels, e-cigarettes are extremely addictive, and the youth are already more susceptible to this addiction. Nicotine devices are deteriorating our youth's health and the future of Guam. This is a sad reality that we now face. But the first place is to end this plague is through education, prevention programs, and the available treatment which this bill supports. Bill number 186-37 aims to diversify funding to government programs and expand the opportunities to increase compliance to twice a year among tobacco vendors, offer the community youth alternative programs, expand the efforts of social media campaigns, and offer prevention education workshops within our schools. I humbly ask for my colleagues' support for Bill 186-37 to strengthen our response against youth nicotine use, which has reached epidemic proportions, and to heed the advice of our youth. Tzuzus Masi.
Tzuzus Masi, Senator. On the motion to place Bill number 186-37 LS to the third reading file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Paris, you are recognized.
Zuz Masi, Madam Speaker. I move to place substitute Bill 187-37 onto the session agenda. It is currently in the Google Drive. And I believe copies have already been circulated.
There's a motion to accept Bill number 187 as amended by the committee and substituted on the floor to accept that version. On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Please proceed, Senator Paris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place substitute version Bill 187-37 on the third reading file, and I wish to discuss.
Please proceed.
Bill 187-37 aims to prohibit the sale of tobacco nicotine products as defined in our tobacco control law through vending machines. In 2009, the Family Smoking Prevention Tobacco Control Act was signed into law, which bans the sale of tobacco products through vending machines except for adult-only facilities. In 2016, the Food and Drug Administration, in its final rule, deemed electronic nicotine delivery systems, or ENDS, as products meeting the statutory definition of a tobacco product, to be subject to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, as amended by the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, thus banning the sale of electronic nicotine delivery systems through vending machines by regulation. The importance of Bill 187 is that it is a proactive measure by ensuring a local ban on the sale of tobacco nicotine products through vending machines, and thus removing a potential loophole of easy access to tobacco nicotine products, especially to our youth. Although the last tobacco vending machine license expired in 2018 and no new ones have been issued since. The 2021 EPI profile has alarming findings. Roughly a third of our youth in middle school and high schools are users of nicotine products, specifically electronic devices. What's even more alarming is the age of initiation. Nearly 1 in 5 Guam high school students tried cigarette smoking for the first time at the age of 13. 11% of our middle school students tried smoking before the age of 11. About 39% of our students were exposed to tobacco smoke at home. Less than 1 in 5 ever received help or advice from a professional to stop smoking. The State Epidemiological Outcomes Workgroup, or SO, identified that the leading cause of underage tobacco and nicotine use amongst our youth is the accessibility to tobacco and electronic cigarettes. Accessibility can include licensed retailers failing to verify the customer ages by checking identification cards or through the process of gifting tobacco electronic cigarettes to minors. Furthermore, in August 2023, SO reported in the EPI profile that tobacco consumption to date remains higher than in the US for both adults and youth. Although SO indicates an overall decline from 1998 to 2018, Guam still remains one of the highest smoking prevalence rates across the US, states and territories. The SO states that a significant contributing factor to the decline over a 10-year period in tobacco nicotine use in Guam is a direct result of stronger local policies, increasing enforcement efforts, and higher taxation. Bill 187-37 is one prong in this multi-prong approach to create safeguards for Guam's youth by prohibiting the sale of tobacco, electronic cigarettes, and their related products through vending machines on Guam. And I humbly ask for my colleagues' support. Zuz Masi.
Zuz Masi, Senator. On the bill number 187-37 as amended, on the motion to place on third reading, is there anyone who would like to be recognized? Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Good morning to the people of Guam, and good morning to my colleagues. As a co-sponsor of the measure, I definitely rise in support of it. And I again commend the author for her forward thinking. All it takes is a simple Google search, or Bing for those of you who go that way. Just type in vaping vending machines and you'll see that selling vape through vending machines is all the rage in many other places. And so I'm proud to be part of this legislation that will prevent this predatory practice from being established on Guam, and I implore my colleagues to do the same. Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker.
Sidus Masi, Senator Barnett. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on 187-37? If not, then the sponsor may close.
Madam Speaker, I just perhaps would like to offer co-sponsorship to my colleagues if they would like to join. Okay, so if there is no objection, I would like to add all senators as co-sponsors to Bill 187.
On the motion to add all senators as co-sponsors, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Perry.
All right, thank you so much, Madam Speaker. So according to the Signer report conducted by the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, Peace Prevention and Training Branch, and DRT, between 2018 and 2022, over 100 citations were issued to retailers selling tobacco products to persons under the age of 21. And a recent handful of the violating retailers were on their second and third violations within a 5-year period. Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, their testimony stated that codifying this prohibition into law not only aligns our local policies with federal regulations, but it creates safeguards in our community that control youth's access to these highly addictive and carcinogenic products. Removing the option of unsupervised points of sale of tobacco electronic cigarettes will be another prong in this multi-pronged approach to address this tobacco ends epidemic impacting our island's youth. I thank my colleagues for their support, and I make the motion to move Bill 187-37 as substituted into the voting file. Sidus Masi.
Sidus Masi, Senator. On that motion to place Bill number 187-37 LS as amended by the committee and substituted on the floor onto the third reading file and further amended on the floor to the third reading file. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Bill number 191-37 COR, Senator Parkinson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to make a motion to add Bill number 191-37 COR as amended by the Committee on General Government Operations and Appropriations, sponsored by William A. Parkinson, an act to add a new Chapter 81 to Division 2 of Title 21 Guam Code Annotated, relative to mandating all Government of Guam lease offices to be ADA compliant, and to cite this act as the Government of Guam ADA Compliance Act of 2023. And I would like to discuss.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill 191-37 COR aims to make all government leased offices space in Guam fully ADA compliant. The Americans with Disabilities Act, a landmark federal legislation enacted in 1990, has played a pivotal role in promoting equal opportunity for individuals with disabilities. However, it is disheartening to know that not all Government of Guam offices currently meet these essential requirements. Under the proposed bill, every government leased office will be mandated to adhere to the guidelines set forth by the Americans with Disabilities Act. This measure is designed to guarantee that people with disabilities enjoy equal access to public services, facilities, and employment opportunities. By rendering these spaces ADA compliant, we aim to create a more inclusive environment where individuals with disabilities can actively participate in civic life in a productive and satisfying manner. Madam Speaker, this legislation represents a crucial stride in our commitment to fostering this society. We envision a Guam where every citizen, regardless of their abilities, can engage fully and savor the same opportunities as their fellow citizens. As I introduce this bill, I want to stress that it is not just a legal requirement, but a moral imperative for the government to set an example by adhering to the highest standards of accessibility. Under the proposed legislation, all government offices leased by the government are expected to meet ADA compliance standards by October 1st, 2024. This timeline underscores the urgency of our commitment to creating an environment free from physical barriers that might hinder individuals from accessing essential public services. This is the second piece of legislation that I propose regarding ADA compliance, following Bill 98-37, which aims to make all Guam Department of Education schools ADA compliant. The impetus behind these bills is not merely about ramps for students in wheelchairs. It is about inclusivity, fairness, dignity, and finding ways to make sure we are all productive citizens on our island. We witnessed considerable support for Bill 98, indicating a shared commitment to assisting our disabled youth. However, the challenges faced by individuals with disability extend beyond the classroom. They do not stop when you become 18, and it impacts their day-to-day activities when our buildings are not in ADA compliance. Today, I reiterate that our government must set an example. This legislation underscores our dedication to creating a more inclusive society where everyone can participate. I'm grateful for your attention and support as we work together to build a more accessible and equitable future for all. And I look forward to the discussion on the bill today. Madam Speaker, I also have proffered an amendment. It has been sent to the clerks and uploaded into the drive. Essentially, the amendment requires DISID to submit a request for appropriation to fund this act, and it also moves the effective date to October 1st, 2024, so that we could discuss the budget needs where it's most appropriate during the budget season. With that, Madam Chair, I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I certainly support this bill. But, you know, as with every major process, you know, there are issues that need to be addressed. And certainly why at this stage, when ADA has been in, you know, it's been a law for many, many years, why do we have government offices or offices that are leased that are not in compliance with ADA requirements? Certainly a number of years ago, Madam Speaker, probably in order to even get this legislation adopted, you know, decisions were made, laws were put into place to grandfather, remember those words, grandfather, a number of buildings that we see today that are still here that are not ADA compliant. Well, I have no objection to the bill. I don't think October of this year is going to be adequate enough. Let's just even deal with issues of procurement. What about existing facilities that are owned by GovGuam? You know, we're still waiting for DOE to address basic mold and air conditioning issues. How many years later? With or without the last typhoon that we had? And then also for leased office spaces, if these offices are not ADA compliant, if these office spaces were grandfathered in, is that a reasonable amount of time for an office owner, whoever the owner may be, or the landlords may be of these facilities, to address compliance issues, depending on what they may be? I don't know if it's, you know, installing an elevator. I don't know if it's having to end a contract and relocate to another office space. Whatever the case may be, I don't think a few months is going to address that. You know, talking is easy. This is probably the easiest thing I'm going to do today, is get up here and talk about how I want the world on Guam to be. But the actual mechanics and the heavy lifting that's involved in executing it, well, that's another situation. And we have to look at the real details here of how are we going to have this implemented. And is the funding going to be there? I don't know. But, you know, if we're talking about our DOE schools, because, you know, we've had a number of roundtables. I'm sure we'll have a number of them, you know, even though there's so few of us sometimes that actually attend these roundtables that deal with the real details and getting into the weeds of what the issues are and corrective actions that are needed to actually address improvements in the physical infrastructure of our school system. And we're not even talking about the academic side. Yeah, I roll my eyes up in my head once again. So while I laud the bill, I will support the bill. I'm going to have to put an amendment to extend the timeline, because I don't think the timeline is reasonable. I mean, we simply say it and it should be. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Well, that's not the case, and no matter how we want to play this game, the reason these buildings, many of them are very old, even though we only talk about one school in particular, a lot of these schools have been around since the 1960s, particularly a lot of our elementary schools on Guam. I don't know to what degree. I don't know if an assessment at all has been done. I don't know what the cost is going to be. I don't know what the timelines are going to be. I don't know if the resources are there to do it. Certainly we want to work towards compliance, but those are all the unanswered questions. Simply saying, oh, I want it this way. Well, this is not going to address that. It's not going to address that in the near term for some. Some things will be easy to correct. Other things are probably going to require several years or more, assuming that the funding is there. Because again, is the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart, or shall we say the carabao? Which is it? We want to put things in place, but we don't have the mechanisms and we don't have the funding identified. Do we even know? And I'm going to ask the sponsor, do you even know what the financial impact is going to be or what the cost is going to be to assess, to take all these government facilities, just those owned by GovGuam, not even those that are contracted in the private sector, to get these facilities into compliance?
Would the sponsor yield?
Yes, ma'am, I would. I thank the good senator for all of her points. She's absolutely right on everything she said. I agree with her that maybe the timeline might be a little bit too short, and there still are a lot of unanswered questions. And so I would 100% support an extension of the timeline if the good senator would proffer it. And I have a lot of the same questions you do. As legislatures, the way we have these conversations in the public is by introducing legislation and debating them in public. I welcome the debate on this legislation because by people challenging this legislation, we will get the best possible version of it. And if the best possible version of this legislation requires a little bit of a longer lead time, I am willing to work with my colleagues to find what is the best possible path to make sure our schools and our government buildings are ADA compliant. We will do whatever it takes, and I will say that as a junior senator, I do not know all the answers. But with all the experience and wisdom we have in this room, I think we can find a solution to make this bill passable and workable and practical. That work is not easy. I am not an expert in all things procurement. We see it's kind of a mess, and it's probably true that it is going to take a lot longer. But I welcome this challenge as long as we have the commitment by this body to see it through. Because I myself recognize that this will not be taken care of in one season. This will be a multi-year effort with multiple steps. I see this as one step in many steps. So I thank the good senator for her comments, and I don't have the answers because, frankly, those are very, very tough questions, and you're right. Maybe the timelines on this aren't quite long enough.
Again, Madam Speaker, if I can ask, does the sponsor have any idea what the possible estimated costs may be in government, to address the upgrades or improvements that are needed in government departments or agencies, including Department of Education, to bring these facilities into ADA compliance?
For government
sponsor yield.
Yes, I will yield, ma'am. For the government-owned buildings, I'm not sure what the impact would be. But for the leased buildings, I imagine the impact would be zero, because if the buildings aren't ADA compliant, that's going to be on the building owners that we are leasing from, not on the government of Guam. That just means we can't release at those buildings, and we're going to have to find new locations. But in terms of cost to us, there's no direct cost to us because that is on the owner of the building.
Appreciate the response, Madam Speaker. Again, I don't think there's going to be zero cost, even for lease facilities, because in some departments, let's take public health as an example. Just one example, public health. How many different locations have they rented out? Perhaps they're all ADA compliant, that may be the case, but do we know? No, we don't have an assessment. It is going to cost if it involves moving. If these department or agencies have to move, relocate, reset up elsewhere, there is cost involved in that. Is that going to be budgeted? Do we have the funds for that? Do we have any idea what the cost is going to be? Again, I have no objection to the purpose of this legislation. I just want to ensure that in the pronouncement of all that we want to do and be, you know, the actual heavy lifting and the actual groundwork that needs to be put in place, well, that's where the real work comes in. And I just don't want to see us pass another bill and then 3-5 years from now hear that, oh, gee, nothing ever happened because no assessment was taken. We already see the challenges and the nightmare with Department of Education right now, just to address air conditioning, just to address mold. My goodness, let's talk about mold at GMH. Let's go there, Senator Jesse. We'll go there together. So let's deal with the reality of where we're at. I think maybe, you know, it's important to get an assessment. Is there a desired timeline? Does a sponsor have a desired timeline on an assessment so government agencies can go, you know, go back and do a little more work and get more data and more information, because we're going to end up in a situation where we're passing and mandating something, and yet we're not going to provide the timeline or the resources to make it possible to execute. And then we're going to come back, of course, and bash the rest of the directors in Gov Guam, because that's the ongoing cycle. Because I have no idea what it's going to cost. And how are we going to measure that with everything else? Because, you know, the party will be over soon. I'm engaging the parties. You know, it's coming to an end. It must be sunrise now. This amount of money that some of our colleagues here have been basking in and only know, you know, it's not going to last. And the demands and the cost of government, this legislature since last term, has substantially increased the cost of government on the backs of our people. So how are we going to address funding it? This, to me, is we're going to pass this. We have no assessment. We have no idea what the cost is going to be. And is that the responsible thing to do? And is that going to address the concerns of all those that need the service? Because trust me, if we don't have a disability, if we live long enough, we will have one. That's a reality that we have to deal with. So again, I support the legislation, but I think we need to acknowledge moving forward that we don't have all the infrastructure in place to address it. I am going to move for an amendment, and I'll put that together with council to extend the timeline so that even in the case of privately leased buildings, there's a timeline also that's going to be needed for, you know, these private landowners, landlords, to be able to address compliance if there is not current compliance, or if a government agency has to relocate because it's not possible to do so. That may be the case as well. Like I said, there are a number of these buildings back in the day that were grandfathered and allowed to continue to operate, you know, for public access that didn't meet these requirements to begin with at the time because they were constructed quite some time ago. So with that, Madam Speaker, I'll work on an amendment, and perhaps you can allow other colleagues if they have any questions or comments, and I'll work with council on that. Thank you.
There's a motion to allow the senator to come back with her amendment, and while we proceed with others, is there any objection? Not, we'll proceed. Senator Parkinson, there's an amendment passed out, though. Can you bring that to her attention? That we've received, but not proffered yet. That might save some time. All right. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Lujan, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too rise in full support of the bill. And likewise, as the amendment is being proffered, I want also the consideration of the fact that, you know, the assessment needs to be made government-wide on what either government-owned facilities or government-leased facilities, and what are in full compliant, what are in half compliant or non-compliant at all. Because as we traverse down this road here, we have to also take in consideration not just maybe the procurement challenges that may arise and the cost, but we also have a labor shortage here in Guam. And whether or not, I mean, it'd be great to have government-wide one contractor maybe in charge of and making sure that all government buildings, either owned or leased, I mean, owned buildings or leased buildings are in compliant, and they're given one contract to make sure everything is done. But that's not the reality. And so maybe some government-owned facilities are going to require a bigger contractor. And again, the challenge that may happen with the procurement, and the smaller or a smaller government agency that will require a smaller contractor. But again, we have a labor shortage, and most of our contractors have been absorbed by the military contracts. So as we traverse and go down this road in regards to timelines, we have to take that in consideration, and whatever timeline we put on, it may have to be revisited again because of either a procurement challenge, or in this case that we know moving forward, we have a labor shortage, and that could again be a big hindrance in moving forward. So I don't know what that timeline extension may be, but whatever we put it at, it may have to, it may have to be revisited later on again because of these situations that may come up. But again, as the previous speaker, Senator Brown, had mentioned, we're all in support of this, but a timeline, and I wish I could give you a definite timeline in regards to that, but all these factors that work into the possible hindrance in moving forward, procurement challenges, labor shortages, again, this body may have to, again, address that moving forward, again, revisit that and moving forward, and may have to amend even that date that has been set forth to extend it even more. Hopefully not, but there is a great possibility. With that, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there any other senator who'd like to be recognized? If not, we'll take a 1-minute recess for the amendment. Senator Brown has concluded her remarks. Is there any other senator who would like to be recognized? Senator Brown, did you want to proffer an amendment?
Madam Speaker, I conferred with Senator San Augustine, who's working on a very similar amendment, and so I've agreed to work with him on that.
All right,
Thank you.
Is there any other senator who would like to be recognized? Senator San Augustine, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, as we were working on that, on the amendment, a couple of my colleagues were asking if we can make the changes, so we're working on that. But, you know, I want to speak about the bill. Number one, the bill says it's in reference to anyone leasing, GovGuam folks leasing buildings. It's not about GovGuam buildings. And I understand my colleagues talking about DOE. Well, that's a management thing. I was there and we were trying to push that. We want to talk about other agencies that are not in compliance today. Well, you know, we need to remind ourselves that I may be wrong, but I think I'm correct, is that if you lease a building, if anyone that's doing rental out there, they need to have the ADA compliance to begin with. So that's an easy one. Now, for some of our folks today that are leasing building that's not ADA compliance, well, the amendment I am proffering right now, and it should be coming out very soon, is we're looking at actually October 2026, way out, so that everyone that gets elected can make the adjustment. Any GovGuam agency that's in a building right now that's not ADA compliance can go back to procurement, so when they do the RFP, it's got to meet that ADA requirements. It allows all the flexibility. But we need to remind it, very simple, the bill is not about GovGuam. In general, GovGuam buildings. It's about anyone leasing. GovGuam agency leasing, being in compliance. And I know that there was no funding written here. This came from my committee because there's no money involved here. If an agency is going to move into a building and lease it, they need to be ADA compliant. And that's why the amendment I'm proffering right now, and we're tweaking it right now, is to change the enactment to October 2026, and then as other colleagues have spoken, and we're working it, we may change that. But at this point, I asked the author that his amendment that he's proffering. I'm trying to understand why we need to ask DICIT to ask for money to do their job. Go ahead and take the agencies, get with Public Works when they give the permits to build the buildings, when they lease the buildings. Make sure they're ADA compliant. DICIT should have the ability to do their job. If they need additional funding, when we go through the budget, ask for it. And then we'll ask them the question, well, what have you done with what you got? That's the major question. And when it was brought up about GMH, we're going to have an oversight hearing Monday afternoon. Ask the question, where's the money at? Why is the mold still there? And then we can go through every agency. We figure out now where or how are you spending the money that you're given. We're just about 6 months in the fiscal year. We need to focus on that and remind them that you have 6 months to do what you're supposed to do. Be ready to answer it. But on this bill, like I mentioned, we're tweaking right now the amendment. And as soon as that's done, I'll present the amendment, Madam Speaker. It was almost done, but there were comments from my colleagues. If you give me another minute, I can check if it's done already. All right? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
We'll take a 1-minute recess. Back from recess, Senator Sanoxian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I apologize. The amendment has been submitted. It's just to address on line 26 and 27, page 3. This act shall be effective October 1st, 2026. This allows everyone that's leasing to go to the procurement. If you're a GovCom agency, go to your procurement and kick out your RFP now. Let them know that by October 26th, you're going to move somewhere else. And if any of the elected officials here today are in a non-compliant, non-ADA compliant building, you get ready to move somewhere else. And if you move tomorrow, it's even better. But this is until 2026. And there's no appropriation requirement for this at this time. Unless the GovCom agency needs to get one, then we'll see it then in the budget, prior to the budget, hopefully. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. So are you proffering this amendment? All right, so on the amendment, is there anyone who'd like to speak on the amendment? Senator Parkinson, on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my good colleague for his collaboration on this effort, as well as the expertise and wisdom of Senator Joanne Brown for bringing to our attention the necessity for this change. I support this change. I've only ever wanted to make sure that we take the first step, and this is the first step. We have a lot of unanswered questions because these agencies won't be asking these questions until we make them ask these questions. And so by passing this legislation, we are taking the first step to knowing the answers to these questions and going through the many, many steps we are going to have to take to ensure ADA compliance, not just with the schools, but with all of our government leased buildings. So I support this effort in the spirit of collaboration so that we can take this important first step and start moving forward in terms of getting all of our buildings up to code. Let's be the example for the people of Guam and all the businesses that have to follow our example. With that, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? Senator Perez, on the amendment, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do support the ability for access for those that are disabled, but I'm just concerned about this amendment because, similar to what we experienced with the schools, they delayed the sanitation rules for 5 years, and it wasn't until recently, towards the end of that 5-year period, that there was a lot of attention brought to making sure that our schools comply. And so if this, we're delaying the enactment for 2 years, but I think what's really important is that there should be movement now as far as putting together a compliance plan of some, so that there should be steps taken in the intermediate time, prior to the implementation. So perhaps maybe it's another amendment as far as this is concerned, but maybe I could work with my colleagues and if they support this endeavor. I could also probably set aside my time if I can work on an amendment. To another one who wants to speak.
Is there any objection to Senator Perez coming back with an amendment? If not, is there anyone else who would like to? Senator Perez, is that an amendment to this amendment?
I think it would have to be amendment to this. I think.
All right. Is there any objection to setting aside Senator Perez's time while she works on an amendment to the amendment? We're going to take a 5-minute recess. Recess, Senator San Augustine, you have the floor. Oh, Senator Paris, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment.
I support this amendment after discussion with the sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? If not, then sponsor may close on the amendment. It's waiving closing. Is there any objection to this amendment? Seeing no objection, amendment passes. Senator San Augustine, on the bill, you're still recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm in full support of the bill. We changed the effective date. We'll be able to move forward and everybody can start planning now. That are leasing GovGuam agencies or entities, elected officials, or if you're going to lease, be prepared that you need to walk into an ADA compliant building. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, Senator Teitzkui, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon to my colleagues. Madam Speaker, my concern of the legislation was actually explained by, and very well done by Senator Brown. And talking with the author of the legislation, realizing it too. This body should stop these unfunded mandates. We should not be pushing bills through unless we can identify funding. I think by extending the deadline, as good Senator San Augustine did, gives the opportunity to allow these agencies and these private companies to assess. And that's exactly what the bill does. It doesn't say how much it's going to cost. It doesn't give an amount or says general fund money. It doesn't say anything like that. It's an assessment, a bill that requires these agencies, as well as the private sector, to assess. And I think that's important first. Once they do that, and they come back, and I think it was August of 2026, to tell us how much this will cost the government of Guam, then we'll know, and then we have to identify the funding. That's the proper way. That's the proper way of doing it. So I have no problem with this bill that does this. However, we do know that this project is going to be overseen by DICIT. All this information should be given to them as they go through this and make sure they're checking off what agencies has provided this plan or their assessment in their agency. But, and if I can, and if my colleagues can indulge me saving a tree and just a simple amendment, and that is on page 3. It's line 13. Before that, Madam Speaker, of course, this is section 81105. It talks about annually transmitting a written report. This written report is only for the legislature. That's not going to help DICIT, since they're the ones that are going to oversee this plan. So my amendment is just simply incorporating DICIT. So it would be on line 13, page 3, include, right after the legislature, the Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities. It's as simple as that, because they need this information, not just the Speaker's office. So, I'd like to make this amendment without, writing it out, and if my colleagues accept.
On the motion to allow, on the motion to add the words DICIT on line 13 on page 3 of the bill, after Speaker of the Legislature in Guam and the Guam Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities. On that amendment, is there anyone who'd like to speak? If not, sponsor may close on the amendment. Is there any objection to the amendment? Seeing no objection, amendment passes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's all I have. I appreciate that, and I'm sure DICIT will appreciate that, because now they'll have the plan in front of them to submit to us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill?
On the main motion, Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm rising to speak on this bill because I just want to make the record very clear, from my perspective at least, because we are portraying to the public that we are allowing the government of Guam to lease buildings that are not ADA compliant. If that's the case, then I think there's something wrong with the government of Guam. But what the bill does is not come down on GSA or anyone else who's leasing these buildings, but comes down on we, the government, the people of Guam, the taxpayers of Guam, are going to pay for private businesses to renovate their spaces to make them ADA compliant. Why would we do that? Why aren't we just holding the feet to the fire on these agencies to lease ADA compliant buildings? I asked the Department of Public Works, and he says all the government leased buildings must be ADA compliant, so should the parking lots. We all know this. In our own leases for the legislature, we require ADA compliance, and the government of Guam should be doing that. We didn't see this in the testimony. No one from GSA came and said, oh, we can't do that when we are trying to go and bid out for government buildings. It doesn't make sense to me. Why do we need a bill to tell us that we need to make the buildings that we are going to rent out? In other words, we're going to pay money for those spots that then we're going to go help them and give them time to make them ADA compliant. It doesn't make sense. I'm not familiar with any 40-year, 50-year leases of any private buildings. Normally they're restricted for very short periods of time. So if there was some kind of error, that should be corrected in the next procurement. I asked Director Byrne, is there such a thing as leasing out non-ADA compliant buildings? He's in DC, so I don't want to really hold him to his answer without giving him some time to really look at it. But he says to his knowledge there's one, but I'm not sure whether, and he says that was procured during the emergency and that because of the emergency they were able to waive ADA compliance. The bill requires DICIT to go and be the compliance officer for ADA compliance for agencies that are renting out from private businesses. DICIT already receives complaints, and they will do what they can to advocate. They are advocates. And they, in their testimony, very clearly said they were told years ago by the Attorney General's office, it is the Attorney General's job to to enforce ADA compliance. So why would we take from the Attorney General and put it on lay people like DICIT to go and enforce compliance with landlords who don't want to comply and agencies that are leasing contrary to law? I say we leave that with the AG where it belongs and let them do the enforcement. And any complaints that exist today, take them to the Attorney General's office. We don't need to do this runaround of we're going to give them until 2026 or whenever to comply with ADA. It's supposed to be they comply. This bill does not mandate that our government of Guam buildings comply. It mandates that the buildings we're leasing out comply. I can't understand why we wouldn't start with our own house first. You want to spend money making agencies make a plan for a private business and then implementing the plan for that private business? Why not spend that money and make our buildings compliant? Our own buildings. On page 3, subsection C, it says, government agencies and departments shall allocate necessary funds in their budgets to implement the accessibility compliance plan that agency also had to pay for to prepare. Normally, you have to hire engineers to tell you whether your building is ADA compliant or not, or people who have been very well trained in that. And that's exactly what DISIT said. They would need an entire new division of DISIT. 7 more staff at least, vehicles, computers, all of it. I think BBMR said $600,000, and BBMR and OFB, our own Office of Finance and Budget, said there's no money to fund what this bill is saying must be done. And I don't know whether we kick it down the road for 2 more years, whether that makes it a funded mandate, or is that some kind of trick to get around the law that says you're going to put this extra burden on these agencies, fund them. But I don't want to fund that government agencies are going to allocate their funds to implement compliance plans for private businesses. And I don't want to fool the people into thinking that we are not required to comply with ADA. I just think, I don't know what kind of message we're trying to send. Like, we're going to give ourselves a big exemption from ADA? Is that what this bill's trying to do somehow? That we're not going to require these buildings or our own government to lease buildings that are ADA compliant for 2 more years? OFB said, the legislation does not identify a fund source to adequately fund the division that DISIT would need to establish or the staff to implement the requirements detailed in the bill. The bill requires applicable agencies and departments to allocate funding to achieve compliance, which was not budgeted in 2024. So we're putting this mandate on a promise that we will budget it in 2025 or 2026. This is one of the costs that should not be borne by the government of Guam. This cost should be borne by the lessors. Private business. This is like the second bill that we're discussing that's trying to put on the backs of the people of Guam, the taxpayers of Guam, how we're going to take care of private businesses. Just like the solar power. You can get solar power, but we're going to put it on the backs of the residential customers to pay what we have lost. So I hope there's not a press release that says, oh, now I'm against ADA compliance because I don't want to pass this bill. But no, I want us to do things. First things first. Why not require the agencies? It says here, I see it in the bill, as if for the first time ever, we are going to all requests for proposals issued by the government of Guam relative to government lease office spaces or construction of government buildings shall comply with all rules and regulations of the ADA. Did we need that? This is a federal mandate. Of course, they have to comply. Somebody mentioned something about, oh, those buildings that are grandfathered. Whatever the ADA says, we haven't taken it upon ourselves in the government of Guam to rewrite the ADA. We're not doing that in this bill either. It's a federal law, easily enforced by the Attorney General of Guam. I say if you have any complaints, send them to him. Do not put an additional burden on DISIT unless you want to fund them, and you can do that right now. And do not allow agencies to spend their money to make private businesses' buildings compliant. Put that burden on the buildings themselves. It is on those buildings already. That's why I'm saying, if you have any complaints, bring them to the Attorney General's office. And I don't know why we're going to ignore DISIT's testimony. I don't know why we're going to ignore BBMR's testimony or why we're going to ignore OFB's testimony. Yes, our buildings should be ADA compliant. So let's not try to fool the people and saying, by this bill, we're going to make our buildings ADA compliant. By this bill, we're going to pay for private businesses to make their buildings ADA compliant while the government of Guam buildings sit, lacking maintenance and repair. And I'm going to I think we should talk to Director Byrne and GSA as to how in the world did they create an exemption, if they did. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Anybody else on the main motion? Anybody else? Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the retiring speaker. I wasn't sure this morning. I was kind of scratching my head as I listened to the debate and the discussion about the ADA compliance. And again, ADA is a federal law which we are already supposed to be following. We are already supposed to be complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act already. And so I'm not sure if in introducing this bill we're thinking, oh, we're not going to comply with the federal, maybe we can comply with the local. But the bottom line is we aren't ADA compliant. And the biggest offenders are not necessarily those that we're leasing offices from, it's ourselves, it's the actual government of Guam. Do you guys know Auntie Evelyn? I know Auntie Evelyn. Auntie Evelyn is one of the most famous riders of the mass transit, or whatever we're calling it nowadays, Regional Transit Authority, okay? Auntie Evelyn is an American with a disability. She's in a motorized chair. And she comes here to the legislature to share her concerns and her many problems that she has with riding the Guam Regional Transit Authority buses. Why does she come here? Why does she come here to talk to the speaker? Why does she come here to talk to myself? Why does she come here to talk to our staff? I'll tell you why she comes here. Because she cannot access the office of the Guam Regional Transit Authority, because it's located on the second floor over at the Department of Public Works compound. And so while we're in here showboating about how we want to fall all over ourselves to help those people that we're already supposed to be helping, the truth is, it's not the leased offices, it's ourselves. And so when we talk about taking first steps, these are not the first steps. This is an existing law we're supposed to comply with. And I pray to God that this is not some special interest legislation where somebody wants to lease their offices to GovGuam, but they don't want to pay to upgrade to become ADA compliant. So now we're going to put it on the backs of the taxpayers. And you hear these things. You hear that, oh, so-and-so's business that normally does this, now they're getting into real estate. Now they're going to be renting from a government agency. And when I see a bill like this and it reads, government agencies and departments shall allocate necessary funds in their budgets to implement the accessibility compliance plan that the private businesses are supposed to pay for. It's wild to me that we're doing this dance about compliance with the law that we're already supposed to be complying with. And let's talk about the schools. So yes, I conducted an oversight hearing on special education. And yes, the subject of ADA compliance was brought up. And I instructed the Guam Department of Education, as they make their rounds, as they try to comply with the public health rules and regulations which are going into effect at the start of this next school year, I said, hey, as you go around, do your checklist and figure out where we need to make improvements so that we comply with ADA. And they're already doing that. And yeah, I don't want to be on a press release saying that because we're critical of this bill, because we asked the questions, that we're somehow against persons with disabilities. That's ridiculous. So before we point the finger at these offices we're going to be leasing, and according to what the retiring speaker had said, they're already required to be ADA compliant. Let's take a long, hard look in the mirror and look at ourselves. It's like my grandma used to say, when you point the finger at somebody, you got 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. So if an agency like the Guam Regional Transit Authority is supposed to be serving persons with disabilities, but persons with disabilities cannot even access their office, then we're missing something. We're missing something. Not only have I met with Auntie Evelyn several times, I've also met with DISID. And guess what? DISID is having a hard enough time trying to meet their mandates. And now we're going to make them the police of the ADA? They have never been an enforcement agency, ever. They're struggling to meet the mandates with limited funding. And we're going to take this responsibility away from the toughest AG on crime and put it on the hands of one of the agencies that, again, because our government doesn't make services to persons with disabilities a priority, DISID is at the bottom of the heap when it comes to funding. They're at the bottom of the heap when it comes to how we support them and their mandates. So all I ask is, if we're going to stand up here and we're going to make a big show about how we want to support persons with disabilities, then let's really support persons with disabilities. For real. Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker.
Sijus Masi, Senator. On the bill, is there any other senator who would like to speak on the bill? If not, sponsor may close on the bill. Or is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator St. Nicholas, on the bill, you're recognized.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, and good morning, everybody. I'm a person with disability, and Senator Parkinson's my latest hero. He wants to try to make it better for our students, and he also wants to make it better for those who are visiting our public offices. As a person with disability, I can't walk far, I I struggle upstairs, and it's very, you know, difficult, you know, as one progresses through life, and then they start to lose their abilities and their faculties. And I applaud the author for doing such a thing. And, you know, everything is a work in progress. Everything, you know. We write laws, we do things, you know, to make things better for us all. And it's funny that you know, I see some disagreements on the bill, but you know, that's why we're here. We're here to try to make things better. And thank goodness you are showboating or whatever it is that you're doing, because it's actually drawing light to, and it's not to say that you are, but it's drawing some light to you know, what we're going through in life, the difficulties we're going through. And yes, I've met Miss Evelyn. We always run into each other. And I think I promised her to get her something, a better mobility scooter, because I understand what she's going through. And so, you know, we do come in contact with a lot of people who have difficulty with mobility and otherwise. But, you know, as we're going through life, you know, we want to be able to make sure that we're working toward making things better. And yes, the government, you know, is not in compliance. We've seen that as a school counselor at DOE. But, you know, anything that we put forward, anything that we're trying to do, you know, whatever it is, we're trying to, I guess, work toward making things better. And I applaud the author. I applaud Senator Parkinson for bringing this concern to light, and hopefully, you know, as a government, as a whole, as a society, as a people, you know, that we work together to make things better, and maybe not trying to point fingers at each other and try to tear each other down, because I think it's very necessary that we try to resolve this for persons with disabilities. It's only going to be a matter of time before, you know, it's my turn, and I won't be able to do the things. And I hope that we as a government can work together to make things better for everybody. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I support this bill.
Thank you, Senator San Nicolas. On the bill, Vice Speaker Munya Barnes, you are recognized.
Citos Masi, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to stand and rise. I'm going to say in support of this measure. Madam Speaker, you know, my colleagues are sitting here saying, and even it was noted that the committee report said that DICIT is not getting any support. And I must say, as the former Deputy Director of the Department of Integrated Service for Individuals with Disabilities, I want to say, Madam Speaker, that I am heartened that I can now count on this body to finally fix this long-standing issue. I do want to say, Madam Speaker, that I do echo the previous speaker that just because we have not done the right thing in the past, we have not made government accessible for our disabled population. I do want to say that today is the day we can help make the difference. And you know, Madam Speaker, in the past they used to say that what may have been good back then is not so good today, or what has been bad back then is better today. we, as a government body, when the ADA came down to play, a lot of the facilities did not have the ways and means to work it, but it was implemented or integrated that if any government facility were to update, rebuild, refurnish, renovate, then they have to go into compliance. And for me, the saying also goes that sometimes you don't have to legislate common sense. It should be done because it's the right thing to do. And it's providing that accessibility. So sometimes we have to legislate things so it can be clearly spelled out. It could be clearly defined. It could be clearly delineated of what we can do moving forward to right the wrong, to make the difference, to make the changes so the accommodations can be there. So, Madam Speaker, with all due respect, I just want to say that I do appreciate the author of this legislation, and I really think that by passing this measure, that we will be showing our community that we do care for persons with disabilities, that we do want to help and make a difference. And if we have to do it one piece of legislation at a time to help out, then let us start today. With that, Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to rise and speak in support of this measure, and I thank the author for bringing this measure to the forefront. Sana Masi.
Senator Masi, my speaker on the bill. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? If not, then the sponsor may close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask my colleagues to please support this legislation. In my closing, I do want to address a few points, though. This bill absolutely is a special interest bill. Make no mistake about it. And my only special interest is making sure people with disabilities get the help they need. So on that charge, I am guilty as charged. Let that be put down for the record. I will say also for the record, there will be no scathing press release for this, because I come to this subject in the spirit of cooperation. Just collaboration. I was actually very proud of the legislature today. I welcomed any and all amendments anybody would proffer to make this bill better. I was able to find common ground and levity and cooperation with people who have called me snotty and rude and obnoxious. And by God, we were able to find common ground and hash out some really good work together. So, win, lose, or draw on this bill, I'm proud of what I saw in this chamber today. That being said, I hope it passes. I really hope it does. This legislation is personal to me because, you know, I had a destiny beyond Guam. A great and glorious destiny laid out ahead of me. But I came home because my family needed me. A disabled family member, my own father, racked by years of advanced Parkinson's disease. But this man knew how to live, and we flew all across the world together. And I know what it was like to push a wheelchair around in countries that do not have ADA compliance, do not care for the citizens the way our citizens do in America. And so I am very sensitive to the plights of those with disabilities and proffered this legislation in an effort to help them. This is the second of legislation I have put out. I've had criticisms on all my bills that, hey, we're just doing the schools, what about everything else? So I introduced this second bill to address the buildings that are being leased. And now I'm getting criticism again. What about all the other buildings? You know what? I hear you, and you're probably right. Give me some more time and watch me cook. We'll try to get those other buildings done too. But as the retiring speaker said, sometimes we gotta legislate common sense and we gotta do this one bill at a time. I am not making any promises to the world that this is gonna solve all of our ADA woes. But it's one step, and I think it's one step in the right direction. Nowhere in this bill am I trying to say that the government of Guam is going to pay for the renovations of private businesses. That's 110% not the intent of this bill at all. If the building is not ADA compliant when your lease is up, you can't lease there anymore. We're not asking these people to improve the buildings on the behalf of private owners. If the private owners don't improve the buildings themselves, we're out of those buildings, as we should be. As we should be. I've heard this, why do we need this law? We're already supposed to be ADA compliant, aren't we? But look around. Have we answered that mandate? Have we answered that moral obligation and made sure that these things were done for our people? I look around and I don't think so. And so while this bill might not be the panacea that solves all our ADA compliance ills, it's one step, and it's a step in the right direction. And so I ask my colleagues, we have two options before us. We've heard two sides to this argument today. One side is speaking about collaboration, putting our differences aside, and welcoming any and all amendments to improve this bill, to make it a workable product we could all be proud of. And then there's another side that says, it's way too complicated, we should do nothing. Let's cast aspersions onto the characters of those who would proffer this bill. And I welcome those aspersions to my character. I do, because if you got to attack my character, it means you have no ground to stand on logically on your position, and you must rely on ad hominem attacks to get your point through. And so I welcome that weakness in your arguments. The special interest here is about those with disabilities. But as we heard in the testimony from some of the subject matter experts, these ramps and these bigger doors, they are not just for people with disability needs. They're better for all of us. We all benefit. It is targeted to help these people, but we all benefit. Very rarely in our lives do we have an opportunity to profit and do the right thing. This profits the whole island, and it is the right thing to do. It answers a moral imperative that has been thrust upon us that we must answer the call to. The original ADA was from the 90s. And it is with great shame that we have not fully implemented it. That because of the loopholes of grandfathered in things, that we have not fully embraced that change. But as we sort out our procurement issues, as we are able to unclog the money and make sure that they flow to where they need to go, let's not forget about those with disabilities. As we do these major renovations, as we rebuild for something bigger, better into the future, let's make sure we build for them too, so that they can share in that prosperity with us, so that they do not become wards of the state and burdens on our community, but thriving, contributing members of our community, proud in their place in our community. I'm not saying this is my last bill on the ADA. It probably won't be. I will probably take a lot of this feedback and require our own buildings so we can look in the mirror and we can be proud that we set the example. So I welcome the criticism and the feedback because you tell me where we can improve. And in that improvement and in that daily work, we can make Guam the heaven on earth it deserves to be. With that, Madam Chair, I ask the colleagues to support this measure, and I thank you for listening to my spiel, and I yield the rest of my time. Thank you. I would like to move the bill to the third reading as well.
On the motion to place Bill number 191-37 COR as amended by the committee and further amended on the floor to the third reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Oh, Vice Speaker.
Good morning, colleagues. We are now on Bill 209-37 COR, as introduced by Speaker Therese M. Terlahi, and I will recognize you at this time. Please proceed.
Sizos Masi, Madam Speaker. I make a motion to place Bill number 209-37 as amended by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture. It's an act to amend sections 3803, 3805, 3806, 07, 08, 09, 3810, 3811, 3813, and 3814, all of Chapter 3, Title 10, Guam Code annotated, relative to updating the program, advisory council, and duties of the council concerning community health centers. Onto the third reading file. I'd like to discuss that motion.
You may proceed, Speaker Terlahi.
Sizos Masi. So Bill 209-37 was introduced at the request of the Community Health Center Advisory Council. So these are the northern and southern community health centers. They're governed by an advisory council. And currently the way this, I'm going to call them CHC from here on, the community health centers, or CHCs, are operated in terms of composition and authority conflicts with the Health Resource and Services Administration, or HRSA, guidelines. This is a federal organization, entity, and DPHSS, through its Bureau of Primary Care Services, applied for and receives grants from HRSA to provide primary care services to the medically underserved communities and vulnerable populations in the territory of Guam. So in other words, that's where CHC, our community health centers, gets their funding. That's from HRSA. But our advisory, or some of our provisions in our law are not in compliance with HRSA's guidelines. First, the advisory council is an advisory council, which conflicts with Chapter 19 of the Health Center Program Compliance Manual, which states that the health center must establish a governing board that has specific responsibility for oversight of the health center program project. Thus, a major aspect of Bill 209 is changing the advisory council to the Guam Community Health Center's Board of Directors. It's abbreviated in the bill, GCHCBD. So we're changing it from an advisory council to a board of directors. which retains a governing capacity as opposed to an advisory one. Secondly, the current composition of the board is also not in compliance with HRSA guidelines because the current number of people on the council, which is 7, is less than the recommended range stipulated in Chapter 20, which states that the governing board must consist of at least 9 and no more than 25 members. Additionally, Chapter 20 of the manual states that the majority of the board, quote, must be patients served by the health center, unquote, and the remaining members must be representative of the community and selected for their expertise in relevant subject matters areas. The amended version of the bill addresses these areas of concern and essentially puts CHC in compliance with HRSA guidelines and ensures that they follow the rules to be eligible for grant funding. We believe that this is to the benefit of the communities that these community health centers are serving. At the public hearing on this bill, the Department of Public Health and Social Services and those members of the Advisory Council of the Community Health Centers were all in support of the bill. They made some additional suggestions for changes, and many of those were incorporated in this bill as well, and those are outlined in the findings on the bill. So we have changed the number of board members to 13, from 7 to 13. This number fits into the range recommended by the documents and the individuals who testified, and further, the Legal Bureau of the Legislature said a range is not really going to be very appropriate, so we put in an actual number that was solid, and it's an odd number. So they will know exactly what they need to establish quorum and other things. The BBMR submitted a fiscal note stating that the bill is primarily administrative in nature, so there was no funding impact to the government of Guam, except that we pay quarterly stipends to these board members from the revolving funds of the CHC. So CHC, in addition to federal grants, is also funded by some of the services they are able to charge, and so through those charges, they are also able to fund. So there you have a revolving fund, which is supposed to be self-sufficient. So what I would ask my colleagues to support the changes that we're making to the community health centers. As you know, we also, in addition to the hearing on the bill, had an oversight hearing on these community health centers so that we could see. We have received complaints regarding these. We received several complaints regarding issues that the community health centers were supposed to be addressing when we were hearing even the new hospital bills, as if the new hospital was going to settle those matters that need to be addressed in the community. So the testimony pretty much lined up that if we shore up these things and the community health centers shore up additional services, that we could further service our patients. And as you know, these are those in greatest need of in our community. So we also heard at another oversight hearing on public health that public health has had to move some of its services, since it was moved out of the building in Manilao, into some of these northern and southern community health centers, and they're quite crowded. But they're doing the best that they can, and they are doing more. They just had a recent visit by HRSA representatives who were able to review what they are doing and suggested to them, some areas where they could shore up. One of them was just community outreach. And so you may have seen notices recently that these community health centers are doing a lot more. So they work very hard. And I think they're still a little understaffed, so I'm hoping that this governing board will take care of them being able to hire once and for all, like CEO, and that they will be able to hire, and it will be within their discretion to hire staff as well to fully perform the services that the community needs. We still do not have all the services that our community needs. We've heard that there are x-ray machines and storage rooms, there are dental services not being provided. Those were all being provided by the Central Manilao facility. So however we can shore up these northern and southern facilities will help us to address all the capacity that really went down because of COVID and to help them boost back up. So I ask my colleagues to help me in supporting this bill and to help those community health centers. And I thank you for your support.
Thank you, Speaker Talai. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? Anyone else? Minority Leader, Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. Yeah, Madam Vice Speaker, I'd like to be able to rise in support of this legislation. In the quest to be able to deal with our health issues, our healthcare system issues, you know, one of the areas that obviously that I took focus on was the establishment of urgent care facilities, urgent care center within specifically the Inarahan Community Health Center. And so I appreciate and the intent of this legislation. And I see that it would be able to, again, as the author had stated, it would put the body that is charged with managing the health center programs more in line with the granting agency that provides them the funding to be able to conduct their duties. However, in the establishment of this I guess in amending the statute with regard to the center, I notice here we have the establishment of the CEO. And I guess a question that I would like to pose, and hopefully the author would yield to this question, is in the establishment of this position, the CEO, is this position actually is there the authority to be able to, first off, hire a CEO, and then what are we paying this person? So I guess that if the author can yield to that question.
Speaker Terlahi, would you like to yield to Minority Leader's
and I thank the author of the question. It's an excellent question, and this is actually one of the cores, I think, of the impetus behind the Advisory Council seeking our help. That is because without a CEO, they have had so many challenges trying to live up to the mandate, which includes urgent care of these community health centers. When they finally hired a CEO, the last CEO that was there for a long time was Linda DeNorsi. Remember, she was tapped out of there to be the director of the Department of Public Health and Social Services. I think she was the CEO for 10 years, and the health centers were really thriving. But after that, they have not been able to hire a CEO, and when they did hire one, it was fired by the Department of Public Health director after 1 month. So they've been in this type of a situation, and so HRSA made it very clear, your board is supposed to hire the CEO, and the statute says the community health centers hires the CEO. And so our bill is making it very clear in any conflicting statutes that sometimes have director, sometimes have the bureau, that It is the governing board that hires the CEO, and the CEO who has almost all of the rest of the authority of these health centers. It's either the CEO or the governing board now who would have any of the other authorities listed in our statutes or in the HRSA guidelines. I hope that answers the question.
Minority Leader?
It does, in with regard to historically how it's been done before. However, the position of whether or not it was the director of the organization, the CEO, at that point in time was an employee of the public health already. This provides the opportunity to now hire specifically an individual, not collateral duty, but CEO. And in that, the bill, if you read very carefully, there are some areas here where it was once the responsibility of the director of public health or the administrator of the community health center, which is now going to fall under the CEO. So there's a mesh of now added responsibilities, dual or existing responsibilities, is different now under a different title. However, I don't see here while we're going to say that the board has the authority to hire the CEO, it still appears that the CEO is answerable to the director of public health. So how does that work? You're hired by the board, but you're managed by a director. Again, I appreciate the intent of the bill. I just want to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's with whether or not, first off, the board has the responsibility to hire this individual that's going to be hired, can take on this role, and with now still being answerable to the director, what role does the director have in the hiring? Or if he's answerable to the director and the director is not pleased, can the director fire?
So is that an inquiry to the office?
That's an inquiry.
Okay. With that being said, before you answer, Speaker, we're going to call a moment's recess. They're going to have to reset the mics, and we're going to call for a moment's recess, and then she can answer the inquiry. Imina Trentai Shetina Legislature and Guahan is back from recess. Speaker Zerlahi, would you like to yield to the answer to the question?
Yes, I'd like to yield, and I thank the author again for the question. There is one provision of the bill. The bill was changed so that every reference to the director or the bureau in regards to a power that's supposed to be under the CEO, according to HRSA, was changed to read CEO. There's one part that says the overall management, budgeting, cash and property accounting, and operating oversight of all regional health centers shall be exercised by the director, because these are still under public health. However, if you read further, the duties of the CEO, as in the statute that we did not amend because it was already in law, says there's established, within the program, the CEO responsible for managing the overall operations, finances, personnel, facilities of the community health centers in accordance with the mission, vision, values of the council. So, yeah, and the Director of Public Health agreed. And so we went through the bill together with the chairman of the advisory council, which was Mayor Savares, and the public health staff and the director. They all concurred that these changes would effectuate the actual governance to the CEO. But just because it still is under public health, it's, that provision remains. It just shows the organization. Yeah.
Thank you, Speaker. Minority Leader, Senator Blush, you're still recognized.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. Madam Vice Speaker, I appreciate the explanation. However, again, you're going to give the power to the board to hire, but then leave the power of to take action to the director. What does the director have with the hiring? Is there involvement in that hiring? And if the CEO reports to the director, what power does the director have over the CEO? Madam, again, it's not my intent. I don't want, I like the bill. I'm just trying to find ways to be able to fix this. And this is not something that we can go standing up, going back and forth on this right now. And my understanding is there's other colleagues that have, other concerns and other questions. If I can suggest so that we don't belabor this, can we take a recess until lunch, for lunch, and then come back right after lunch at 2 p.m.? I guess that's my motion.
On the motion to recess to 2 p.m., we are in... Motion carries. We are in recess to 2 p.m.